Hey there, everybody. Phil here. Going to be exploring the analysis tool GEPHI today. So this is actually going to be the first time that I've really been interacting with this interface. I've used some other social media and networking analytical tools before, specifically Communalytic and Netlytic. But this is the first time that I'll be working with GEPHI, but I'm not new to the idea of a network with nodes and edges and some of that other information. What I want to do here is open the GEPHI file that's been provided for me. So I'm going to open this thing up, and it's going to give me, I was saying, what are you really importing and what information is included here. So let's take it slow and look through this. So this is information from the May 2023 incident, that I wasn't actually very familiar with, but it's information regarding like references to the hijab and things that were, popular in the news at the time. So thanks to Dr. Gajala for providing this data for us, and you can see here that it's got GEPHI is making sense out of how many nodes and how many edges there are, and we're going to add this to a new workspace. So there's some already sort of decided information, GEPHI is making sense out of. So I'm going to import this stuff in, and here's our information, right? And, I did a little bit of tooling around with this stuff before. But what's interesting about it is that, just from the sake of navigating around your workspace here, it matters where your mouse is when you start zooming with, like, say, the scroll wheel or the trackpad or something like that. So I kept doing things like scrolling way over here, and then all my data would get off the screen. So you want to be on top of the data and bringing it towards yourself in the center. And then it sort of resizes itself. But what are we really looking at here? I mean, I can hover over individual pieces of information, individual nodes, but I can't really make sense out of it yet. And I'm not really sure what the colors represent and what I'm looking at. And granted, part of that is because I was not the one that created this data set and saved it in the current configuration that it's in. But that doesn't mean that we can't look through some of the tools of GEPHI and try to make sense out of it a little bit. So the first thing that I'm really going to look at is over here on the left-hand side. I'm looking at an overview of my workspace. I'm looking at this particular content that I've imported in, and I'm looking at nodes instead of edges. I've got a palette here, which I can explore, and some other tools. But really what I want to do is choose a layout first. That's just going to sort of break apart all of this data that is being represented here. Now, I'm not sure exactly which one of these template layouts is going to be the most useful for me, but it will be at least useful to see the actions that take place. So right now I don't have any layout. There's just all the information just sort of, bam, given to me there. So let's take a expansion look at this and let it run. And that's it. It just sort of did a zoom in for me, because I can see that it's already finished running. So let's look at something different. When I switch the layout to Force Atlas, then I see all these different attributes here. So these are different parameters that we can give that will determine what happens once we run this layout. So let's just see, by default, we're going to stick with the Force Atlas attributes. And we're going to run it. And you can see that down here, it's saying, well, this is running currently. And as it runs, I'll zoom out a little bit so we can kind of see what GEPHI does. And graphically, it's sort of just separating all of this information so we can start to better see and make sense out of the connections between the nodes and all the edges here. Now, I'm not exactly sure how long this process will take, and you can see that I can stop the process midway if I wanted to, but I'm going to kind of let it go, and I'll keep zooming out a little bit to see where it eventually takes us. But once it breaks all the nodes apart a little bit, then you can start to visualize where the connections really lie, which I think is, you know, important to the whole assessment of this type of data. Trying to recenter everything as it expands based on the layout that we've chosen for it. Now, we'll see the timeline here. I'm not sure exactly. Cannot animate the timeline. Set one before clicking the play button. Let's select the 10-minute timeline. Is that what that means? Not actually completely sure about the timeline. I'll have to do a little bit more experimentation with that. But you can see as it breaks apart, you start to notice, even when you're just hovering around with the mouse, you can see these like big areas of connections. So I'm going to actually stop the Force Atlas, and I'm going to see if we can switch this to something else and just see what happens, right? I'm just exploring with the different layouts. Whoa. What is happening? Whoa! Pretty cool stuff. And you can see here, at least it's giving you a little bit more information about how long it's going to take and everything. Wow. Look at that. It really reminds me of, if you guys had ever watched the, I think it was on Showtime or HBO, the TV show Westworld. Season 3 of Westworld featured, like, you know, the richest man in the universe or something, and he created an artificial intelligence system called, I think it was called Rehoboam or something like that, and it was this spherical interface that sort of predicted human behavior, and that's what this is reminding me of. And I don't think it's far off, honestly. I mean, it's obviously representative of human behavior. I don't necessarily think that it itself is predictive, but we could use this sort of information to make predictions, which is interesting in itself. So now that we've got this interesting layout that is visualizing this data in a much different way, then we can start thinking about filtering things by attributes, by dynamics or edges, meaning like the amount of interactions between, you know, two nodes. And the way that you do that, like, let's just say that we want a time interval. Drag that filter here, and then we'll start to filter things. So I think you would have to go through here and set some particular limits. I'm going to reset this and see if I can do any different filtering. And I'm also going to move in a little bit closer to one of these sections of nodes, see if we can notice any changes happening. So let's say that wow, look at all these, just what the filters are. So your attributes, the conversation name, when things were created, the description, the emojis used, the number of friends that people have. So these are all the different pieces of information that you can use to filter out potential nodes and edges from this information based on whether or not it is useful or isn't useful to you, right? So lots of different ways to present the information to yourself based on specific parameters, and then also ways to filter out specific information. I'm going to do just another one of these layouts and run it just to see what changes. You know, I can see a lot of the edges themselves and the nodes are sort of expanding in different ways. So it's presenting us with, well, I guess potentially more detailed information here that has to do with area, gravity, and speed. So how quickly people are making responses to the information that is being provided. And you can see some of these clustered areas because we've selected this new layout. We're starting to be presented with this additional data that we didn't really have before, based on, you know, the particular attributes of this layout. And we're not being told how long this is going to take. So this process is more detailed and it's analyzing data quite like with a lot more scrutiny, I suppose. It's being much more detailed based on what we're telling it to look into. And you can see that our web, our network between nodes and all these edges is increasing. So interesting to look at. There's like this beautiful storm of interactions. So just the visualization of all this itself just fascinates me, I suppose. And it allows you to really sort of pinpoint specific conversations that are happening, what's popular and what's not. You know, what holds more weight or gravity in the public consciousness on this particular topic, right? Because this is a very specific topic of, you know, something that happened in 2023. So this continues to grow, and, you know, who knows exactly how long this process would take to completely transform into this particular layout. So you would have to make sure that you leave time for yourself based on what it is that you're really looking into. But the reason that I'm doing all this is because I just want to explore what the different options are on how I can read all this different data. So if I'm really mostly concerned with the gravity and the speed of something, that's going to give me a lot of different information than, say, what happened when I went with the Noverlap, just speed, ratio, margin, or this type of thing with relative strength. And when I run those things, some are much easier to process, right? Like this process is already completed. So the level of detail is much different. So there's a couple of things with just like an overview of GEPHI on how you can import an existing data set, how you can choose between different layouts and give yourself different interpretations of data and how you might go about filtering some of that information. So thanks for watching this first tutorial on GEPHI. I'll see you next time.